my husband fate having cancer for years to manipulate me, the letter I am going to read tonight honestly left me completely disturbed, because there are stories where you discover that the person you shared your life with was never truly who they claim to be. And I sincerely believe this story touches on one of the darkest levels of emotional manipulation we have ever read here. Lorena writes to us, and it goes like this. Lorena's story: control disguised as vulnerability. I never thought someone could use something as horrible as cancer to control another person. And honestly, it's still hard for me to believe that I lived for years with someone capable of doing something like that. My name is Lorena, I am 41 years old, and for nearly 10 years I was married to a man named Sergio. When I met Sergio, I thought I had found the most sensitive man in the world. He was attentive, affectionate, emotional, the kind of man who cried watching movies, who wrote letters, who talked about feelings. And honestly, after some pretty toxic relationships, that seemed beautiful to me. We got married relatively quickly, and during the first few years, everything seemed normal. Not perfect, but normal. The diagnosis. Until one day Sergio came home crying. I will never forget that night. He was shaking. He could barely speak. And after sitting down in the kitchen, he told me something that completely changed our lives. I think I have cancer. I felt the world stop. Because honestly, you are never prepared to hear something like that. Never. According to him, doctors had found something concerning during some exams, and they needed to do more studies. For weeks, we lived in terror. I would cry myself to sleep. I researched treatments. I read statistics. I prayed. And honestly, I think I had never loved someone so much as during that period, because the fear of losing him consumed me. Finally, Sergio said they confirmed a type of cancer that was very treatable. And honestly, that phrase sustained us emotionally for a very long time. Very treatable. But still, deadly if he didn't take care of himself. The web of manipulation. That diagnosis completely changed our relationship. And now I understand that is where the manipulation truly began. Because from that moment on, everything revolved around Sergio. Everything. His emotions, his health, his fatigue, his needs. If we argued, he would say that stress worsened his condition. If I got upset about something, he made me feel guilty. Do you really want to fight with me knowing what I have? And honestly, it worked. It always worked, because I lived in absolute terror of losing him. For years, I organized my entire life around his supposed illness. I worked more to cover expenses. I canceled trips. I distanced myself from friends. I even turned down job opportunities because Sergio needed me. And honestly, I never questioned him, because you don't question someone who says they have cancer. That would be monstrous. Or at least that's what I thought. The inconsistencies. Over time, I started noticing strange things. Very strange things. For example, Sergio never wanted me to accompany him to his medical appointments. Never. He always had an excuse. It's quick. You're going to get bored. It's not necessary. And yes, now I understand how suspicious that sounds. But at the time, I simply respected his boundaries. There were also inconsistencies. Supposed treatments that didn't seem to affect him too much. Medical results that I never saw in full. Stories that changed slightly. But honestly, my brain never wanted to connect the dots. Because the idea of someone faking something like that seemed impossible to me. Absolutely impossible. Furthermore, Sergio knew how to emotionally manipulate me in an impressive way. If I ever asked questions, he would get incredibly offended. He would tell me that I doubted him, that I didn't understand how hard it was to live sick, and it always ended up being me who apologized. That completely destroyed my ability to trust my own intuition, the discovery of the lie.
Years passed, and curiously, Sergio never really got worse, but he never fully got better either. He was always stable. There was always a new complication, a new exam, a new treatment, a new reason for everything to revolve around him. And honestly, now I understand that I was living emotionally hijacked by fear, because when you love someone who is sick, you constantly develop guilt. Guilt for getting tired, for getting frustrated, for wanting attention too. And Sergio used that perfectly. Everything exploded 9 months ago. And honestly, I feel like that day I discovered I never really knew my husband. I was looking for some documents in the study because we needed some insurance papers, and I found a folder, a medical folder. I didn't plan on reviewing it, but something caught my attention: the dates. There were documents that didn't match what Sergio had been telling me for years. I started reading, and then I found the truth. He didn't have cancer. He never had it. I still feel nauseous writing that sentence, because my brain literally stopped working when I understood what I was reading. The real documents showed something completely different: a minor health issue, simple treatments, nothing fatal, nothing like what he had been telling me for years. I remember sitting on the floor of the study for I don't know how long, just staring at the papers, because honestly, I felt like I was having a nervous breakdown. My entire life had just changed. All those years, all the fear, all the tears, it was all a lie. And the worst part came next, because I kept searching and I discovered something even more disturbing. Sergio had forged documents, results, emails, even prescriptions. He had constructed an entire illness, an entire narrative, for years. And honestly, I think I have never felt so much fear of a person, because it's one thing to lie, but it's a completely different thing to sustain such a massive emotional manipulation for so long. The confrontation and the sickening truth. I waited for him to come home. And honestly, I think part of me was still hoping for a rational explanation. Something, anything. But when I confronted him, Sergio did something I will never forget. First, he tried to keep lying. Even with the documents right in front of him, he denied everything. Then he started to cry. And finally, he confessed. Yes, he never had cancer. Never. I asked him why. And his answer left me completely frozen. He said, "Because I was afraid you would leave me." Imagine hearing that. Apparently, at the beginning, he exaggerated a diagnosis to get my attention. But then he saw how I completely dedicated myself to him, and he kept it going. For years, because he liked feeling taken care of, needed, important. And honestly, I think that was the most sickening part. Understanding that my love was used as a tool, the ruin of trust. Everything changed after that. I started remembering so many situations from a different perspective. All the times he used the illness to avoid responsibilities, to manipulate arguments, to control my emotions, even to keep me from going out with friends because he never knew when he might get worse. It was constant control based on guilt, and I never saw it. Or worse yet, I didn't want to see it. The hardest part was accepting how much of my life I sacrificed. Opportunities, money, relationships, entire years, all for a lie. And honestly, that destroys something inside you, because you start to ask yourself, did he ever truly love me? Or did he only love what I did for him? Later, I discovered something even worse. Sergio had also lied to other people, friends, family members, co-workers. Everyone believed he was sick, and honestly, that made me realize the level of psychological manipulation he wielded. It wasn't an impulsive lie. It was a character, an identity. And the most disturbing part is that Sergio seemed convinced that he hadn't done anything that grave. He said that technically he had been sick, that he simply exaggerated. He exaggerated, as if faking cancer for years were just a minor exaggeration. The present day. Currently, we are divorced, and honestly, I am still trying to rebuild my mind, because living through something like that completely destroys your ability to trust. I now question everything, emotions, tears, illnesses. And honestly, I hate feeling this way, because I feel like something very important was stolen from me, my emotional innocence. The worst part is that there are still moments where I feel guilt. Guilt, imagine that, after everything, because that is how deep the manipulation was. My therapist explained to me that people like this generate emotional dependency using fear and guilt. And honestly, I think that perfectly describes what I lived through. It wasn't healthy love, it was control disguised as vulnerability. Today, Sergio keeps trying to contact me. He says he needs help, that he is depressed, that he ruined his life. And honestly, part of me still feels compassion, but another part is too broken, because after discovering something like that, you no longer know which of that person's emotions are real. Thank you for reading me. Lorena. Wow. Honestly, this story left me completely disturbed. Because here we are not just talking about a simple lie, we are talking about extreme emotional manipulation. And honestly, I believe that faking a serious illness for years is one of the darkest levels of psychological control we have ever read here. Because cancer doesn't just generate sadness, it generates guilt, fear, compassion, protection, and Sergio apparently used all of that to control the relationship. That honestly scares me a lot. I also want to say something very important. Lorena was not naive for believing him. Most people would never imagine that someone would invent something like that. And honestly, I think a lot of manipulative people take advantage of precisely that. The fact that normal people don't think the way they do. Personally, there is something that impacted me heavily. The fact that Sergio continued to lie even when confronted with evidence. That shows a very powerful level of manipulation. And honestly, I think that's when Lorena understood something terrifying. That she lived for years with someone capable of constantly acting. And that destroys you psychologically, because you start to question every memory, every emotion, everything. And another important thing here, the guilt. Because so many people, after leaving manipulative relationships, continue to feel guilt even after discovering the truth. And honestly, that shows just how deep these kinds of emotional dynamics can run. Now I want to ask you all a very heavy question. Do you think Sergio truly loved Lorena? Or do you believe he only loved feeling needed and taken care of? Because honestly, there are people who turn suffering into a tool for control, and that is extremely dangerous. I also want to touch on something important, intuition. Because Lorena did notice strange things, the medical appointments, the inconsistencies, the documents. But every time she asked, she ended up feeling guilty. That happens a lot in manipulative relationships. The victim ends up doubting themselves. And honestly, I think a lot of people watching this video are going to identify with that. Now I want to read your thoughts in the comments. What do you think of this story? Do you believe that faking a serious illness is unpardonable? Could you ever trust someone again after discovering something like this? And the toughest question of all, what destroys you more emotionally? The lie? The lost years? Or discovering that your love was used to manipulate you? Or discovering that your love was used to manipulate you? I'll read your responses in the comments. And if you have stories you want to share anonymously, feel free to send them in. Because honestly, some people don't just manipulate emotions. They manipulate the entire reality of those who love them.